Oh, it was amazing. It was like meeting Neil Armstrong, on the Apollo missions heading just as he's landing on the moon. I'm meeting a hero of mine, having been thoroughly addicted to the Beatles recording process and the Beatles as a band and the process of recording sound. Then Jeff Emmerich's, one of my heroes. In a kind of old school way, but at the same time, he was at the cutting edge of recording technology in those days, a master of the analogue world of recording, and a lot of his techniques have been, used just part of recording history now. That he has such wisdom and such a sense of adventure. For getting sounds and recording bands, and a lot of his techniques have been adopted, and they're just part of the lexicon now. But people forget, how hands-on and how flying by the seat of your pants, and that creativity of working with the Beatles in that environment, in Abbey Road Studios. A lot of people forget how much actual work went on to get those records sounding like they did. I think so. If you've got a good relationship with an engineer, then you can get your job done a lot faster, whether you be a writer, a performer, artist or producer or a bit of both. If you've got a really great engineer, then the whole process can be, the workflow can be lightning fast, or not, depending on how you want to craft something. But it is a great thing to lean on an engineer. Now, I've worked with a few really great engineers. I've worked with Chad Blake, who's done a lot of stuff with Real World, and also with Neil Finn and Mitchell Froome and a whole lot of other people. He's worked with a lot of artists. So I learned a lot of techniques from guys like that. And so you get to speak the language, so you can talk to another engineer and say, if you do this, you'll get this sound. So it builds up your own kind of, library of processes and how to do things. So you can kind of, if you've got a really good engineer, you can lean on. There's a kind of telepathy there, a bit like if you're in film, your camera assist or your focus puller, working with the cinematographer. It's that kind of telepathy has to happen. You have to be on the same, level. I really like this year locally. I think will have to be probably the VW stuff. There's a few client ads. I couldn't mention who was involved in the filming of them, but they're really clever ideas, very simple, and very not too much trickery going on here and there. I mean, I guess the temptation these days in a lot of advertising is to go for CGI in a big way, conjuring up whatever you like and being able to put it on the screen. But I do tend to like ads that are people orientated and involve some kind of ordinary situation that's sort of looked at in a obtuse way. A little something where somebody's kind of broken the rules in a way.
Exactly.
And that's always what drives, I think, people to find a style and a way of doing things. You're kind of recreating the language in a way of outworking your creativity. If you do break a few rules, it's only because of some of the stuff that Jeff did with tape recording technology. There's a few accidents that happened that actually became, really popular effects or ways of doing things, whether it be, flanging or phasing or using the organ amplifier as a vocal amplifier instead of what it was meant to be for, and using microphones in a different way. Putting a microphone close up to something was never heard of, and pre, Revolver or Abbey Road or Sergeant Pepper. So there was a lot of breakthrough stuff in that regard, and I think filmmakers and ad makers and creatives in general find those things by accident, and I love it when it works out that way. Well, I think the most important thing is performance and getting a really, really good performance. Like if you're in film and whatever's on that, whatever's in the lens, whatever you can do in the lens rather than in post is very important. You've got to have really good stuff to start with. You've got to have wonderful pictures, and that's an optical thing, not a technology thing. And the same goes for sound. If you're recording something, then if you can do something with as simple as signal flow as possible to get a result that's in your face, simple is good, and as fewer elements as possible to create a bigger picture is a really good way to go. Yeah. It's too easy to just pile a whole lot of stuff on. Everyone's got libraries, because we're all Googled now, you can pretty much get any sound from anywhere in the world and throw it onto your project, but whether that's necessarily going to enhance the original idea or not. You've got to have a good original idea, you've got to have a great performance, and you've got to have as little messing with the toys as possible. Otherwise,
so it starts with talent.
Yeah, and it can become an exercise in kind of time wasting in a way, finicking through stuff. It's kind of like, it can be an incredible distraction, and if you want performance to be at their peak, you don't want them staring at screens looking at Pro Tools sessions. If you want somebody to perform in front of a camera really well, then make sure that the camera and the lights are as invisible to the process as possible so that you can get a performance. And those ideas have always been around, and no matter how complicated and smart the technology gets, you're always going to come down to that. Have we got something good to start with? If somebody's sitting in front of a photo shoot and looking at all the, looking at all the slides, do that way, looking at the shoot, the temptation to go, oh, we'll fix that in Photoshop, or let's Photoshop that, or blah, 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 blah. It's easy to do that, but then you go, well, wait a minute, what? There's something kind of special and broken. I mean, to start with, we shot the thing on film, so it looks different, that kind of thing, like mixing and matching and not sticking to one way of working with things, is always a good way. I mean, you heard Jeff talking, every song that came along, it would be a separate thing, and so he'd have a separate way of dealing with the tonality of that song and the sonics and the possibilities of where it should go, especially on Sgt. Pepper. So you had the dynamic was driven by the song itself, so you didn't have a rule that stuck with a bunch of songs on one album. You had separate songs had their own, like separate pictures or separate paintings or photographs had their own integrity, And I think it's a good thing to think about that. So that every project you start is different to the last one, even though you might have systems in place that you think are really good creative systems. Maybe they're not the way to go each time. Maybe you've forethought something, you've got too much of a plan already, And so that's the lesson I've learnt recording through the years. You can do something with just a guitar and a vocal and get a much better result than if you'd slaved over a hot tune with the band for 24 hours straight in the studio. You might end up just singing the song at the piano. It might be a million times better, I moved into a house, another 100-year-old villa in Grey Lynn, where I live very close to town. And the house I'm in comes with a fully working professional studio out the backyard, and it was built in '79, and so it's got a brilliant sound. It's got a great sounding room and a great sounding control room, and I've got some fabulous old gear in there, plus new technology stuff as well. I'm still obsessed with the toys, as everybody else is too. Yeah. I've got my Pro Tools and all that stuff. But also an old tape machine, an 8-track tape machine, and an old, 2-track tape machine, and a desk from the 70s, and all this kind of stuff. So, and that's going to keep me busy for many years. So I'm breaking out a little bit into production as well as self-production stuff. So I'm working on a new record at the moment, along with some other projects. At the moment, I'm involved in doing a memorial song for the Pike River miners. 29 Pike River miners died 3 years ago, So they're doing a choir has commissioned me, a Wellington choir of 150 strong has commissioned me to write a piece of music that they can arrange and sing at a concert in May, and that is a pretty heavy duty thing to be working on.
Right.
You know, as a songwriter, it's you know, I don't do a lot of commission stuff, so it's a big ask, and it's going to be a big learning curve working with an arranger on that many vocals, you know, with that many players, and a brass band. So, you know, I'm always doing something that's slightly out of my comfort zone, which includes my own stuff, because it's not a comfort zone when you're doing it properly.